Hey there, guys. Welcome to another episode of Evolve, where we've talked about the deep things of relationships, and we get sometimes, well, it's sometimes rated R. So I'm Greg, and this is my wife, Leah. Leah.
Yeah, we're excited. This is the next episode. We have our first guest ever. And this is, I will introduce her, and then she's going to also share a little bit about herself as well. But yes, thank you for coming to this episode of Evolve. I am Leah with Greg, and we're going to get started. We're going to dive right in with our guest, Lizzie Parker, who is a up-and-coming author, writer, #1 New York Times bestseller, hopefully soon. So Elizabeth, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me on this podcast. I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you.
And as you said, I am a writer. I've been writing for a really long time. I'm 35 years old and I have 3 children, and I am divorced. I was married for nearly 15 years.
Ooh.
And yes, I was. And I am currently single and very happy being single. I am pansexual. For those of you who don't know what that is,
yes, I was
that's
just going to say, how about you explain that just in case? There's
right.
a lot of new terminology that...
So you like bread?
That would be pan in Spanish.
Oh, okay.
I don't eat as much bread anymore, no. But, so, all I can say is, I like for... when somebody has a label, because some people don't do labels.
Right.
I think that it's very personal. So for me, why I consider myself pansexual is I am attracted to the person, who they are. Now, yes, I do prefer men. I'm just going to be honest. Like, that's who I typically am attracted to. But I have fallen in love with a woman in the past. So I know that for me, it is possible. So
it's more what's behind, what's in the soul than what's externally out there. Then.
Yes, I'm all about like chemistry and connections. And so that's why I consider myself pansexual, is because I know that I could fall in love with anyone, regardless of their gender or their orientation or anything like that.
Right. Awesome. So Greg and I, we've never actually talked about that. What do you identify as?
I don't identify as anything.
No, I would say a cis white gender, like heterosexual. That's how you would say.
I never thought about it actually until just a second.
Oh, so you're actually getting into question now. Like, what do I think I am?
I didn't think I had to give myself an identity, so
it's true. Like, she made a really good point. Like, not everybody wants to label themselves.
I knew what pan was prior to that.
Oh, okay.
I'm not saying
you're not that far behind.
I was being funny, trying to be funny. Actually, I've heard that, and I've heard it explained really well. I thought it was a really good way to explain it, and it was on a show I watched.
Schitt's Creek with David. Yes.
It says I like wine. Sometimes I like red. Sometimes I like white. But
and sometimes I'll have rosé.
Sometimes I have rosé, but I like wine. I'm like, that's a really good way to separate it. I have no judgment on anybody.
Right.
Let me rephrase it. I try my best not to have any judgment on anybody.
You're evolving to not have so much judgment. Okay, so I'm sorry. Let's get back to our guest. And what is it? Is there anything else? We could totally take this on ourselves. But no, is there any other things like you want to share about yourself before we dive into what you ultimately came here to share?
No. I don't think so.
Okay, no. Some people have more stuff they want to talk about themselves and share about themselves. So, okay, so...
No. Just the part that I'm... Oh, like, are you asking me to give, like, my height and weight and what I look like?
Oh,
since
yeah.
I'm single,
Can we also have
in
all
case
your
single
social
guys are listening?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, she did say single, so...
We said you're a writer. What kind of books have you written?
Yeah, we can talk about that
thank you. That is a great question, Gregory. So, I love, like, my favorite is romance. Adult romance is like, I love that. So I've written adult romance. I am actually currently working on a middle grade novel. And then I have some ideas for some picture books. I have written a picture book before.
So kind of
romantic
everywhere.
Satire. I've written like YA, which is young adult. So I really kind of like to write in a lot of different genres. But for me, it always comes back to romance.
Romance. She's got a romantic heart at the soul of it, for sure.
Absolutely.
Now, where could I get your book if I wanted to get it?
Well, I don't have a book that is actually published yet.
Oh.
That is a story for another day, though. My publishing journey. It's the
Okay.
grueling publishing journey. Yeah.
Her evolution of becoming a writer is a whole nother topic. All
Yeah.
right, so let's dive in. What when we talked I talked to you a little bit on the phone prior to getting started here. You had a lot of topics you were thinking of, and we kind of weeded it down because we have talked about on the point of this podcast and the point of bringing relationships is not just the romantic ones, but with our kids, with money, with food, with technology, with nature. We have so many areas and paths that we can take, and we'll end up taking it as we evolve through this podcast. But you, Lizzie, had your own ideas of where you wanted to head and what you wanted to talk about. So what did you end up settling on? Where are you ready to start first?
Well, I think that we had kind of decided that, and I had kind of decided that it would be best to start at the beginning. So for me, like, the biggest thing is my ex and my marriage, like, because I feel like to understand any of the other things, we need to first go there.
All right. Well, I'm ready to go there if you're ready to go there. So you said you were married for 14 years. And
almost 15.
And you are currently divorced. So take us through some of that relationship and why is it no longer existing?
Well, I grew up very religious in a very religious household, and they don't like the word religion, but I call it religion now. It's like what I like to call the modern church nowadays, the ones that are either considered non-denominational, that's like a big, it's still a denomination in my opinion, but it's a big denomination, or Pentecostal, and they're kind of almost overlapping in some ways. And that's how I grew up. And in that culture and that religion and that environment, it's a very big thing to like wait for the one is what it's called.
Yeah,
that's what
and we talked about that in our origin story, Greg and I, in the episode prior to this, like our origin story of like, I had a very specific list of like, I have to have the one, and you can't have intercourse and full on sex until you're with that person. And so can I ask you a question as we're going to dive into that topic too? Did you feel as a young woman, because you married rather young, right? Correct? How old were you when you married?
Yes. So I was getting to that. I married at 19.
Wow, I thought you were 20. Wow, you were 19. So did you feel like the pressure and urgency, like you had to marry young and get married quickly?
So I felt that, yes. And I'm not going to put responsibility on any other one person for making me feel that way. It really was the way that I believed because of the religion and the culture I was raised in. I took it on, like, I'm a very passionate person, so whenever I believe something, I typically believe it like wholeheartedly, and then like I'm just like incredibly passionate about it. So because I was so passionate about it, I like took it upon myself, this belief of the purity movement. I even had the ring that was like True Love Waits, and the book, and the retreats I would go to, and I even committed to not kissing anyone else until I was married, like until my wedding day.
So was that your first kiss ever, was your husband?
Right. Though we did not wait for our wedding day. But he was the only man that I had kissed and obviously done anything else with. And it was, it's not something I would recommend at all. And I have 3 girls.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm saying that I wish that I was a promiscuous teenager, because I have 3 children, and I'm not wanting them to go out and sleep with any and everyone. I'm just saying, I wish that I would not have been so just removed from not just the opposite sex, but from the world, and just like, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to have sex until my wedding night, because sexual chemistry is a thing.
So let's talk about that part of it. Like, how did abstinence and your belief systems positively or negatively affect the relationship once you got married then?
That is such a good question. So I spent all these years waiting, right? Like, I wouldn't even date. I just was like waiting for the one that God had picked for me. That was my belief, and that's what a lot of modern Christians do believe. So I stayed away from boys to a point, and I just went to church, and I believed that the right one was just going to like approach me. So I didn't have any even dating experience. Like I had like a couple of little boyfriends when I was 13, but I mean, who really counts that? At least for me, I didn't do anything. And so I just sat around and I was just waiting. And then I get married, and the only thing that I know about sex is what I had read in romance novels.
Oh dear.
Yeah, which we know is...
Were they Christian romance novels, or were they real, like, Harlequin romance novels?
Like
oh, yeah,
hot and
they were
steamy.
real, like, bodice rippers. We're not going to, like,
What?
shut the door.
You were
like,
a Christian girl reading such trash.
Well, see, this is a whole nother story, but, like, I didn't read it the whole time. Like, I read it when I was 14, and then I kind of stopped, I think maybe a couple years later, because I, quote unquote, was convicted by the Holy Spirit that was moral filth and I shouldn't read it, right? Blah, blah, blah. But I still had enough of it, like, in my head, you know, at that point, even though I wasn't actively reading them when I met my ex. And so I didn't know, like, nobody really spoke to me about
how does a book, a novel, translate to real life intimacy?
Well, so because of my reading, and it wasn't that extensive at that point, it was only a couple years, I kind of had an idea, and you know, you kind of hear things around that, like, it's supposed to hurt when you're a virgin, and but like my mom, no one else, like nobody came like to talk to me to try to prepare me. So I was super nervous on my wedding night, and surprise, surprise, it totally hurt.
Surprise.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, and I'm talking like I was sobbing. It like hurt. But, and I will, you know, because this is not about, you know, saying things that are untrue or bashing anyone. I will admit that he was considerate about that and everything.
Well, that's good to know, at least, that, you know, he was gentlemanly enough.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is it still had to be done. Does that make sense? Like, it's a really weird kind of thing. It's like, I would have preferred to just stop, but there was no stopping. Like, he would have been gentle and he would have been slow, but you know what? It was going to happen because we were married now. And I remember it hurt the next few times afterwards. So the honeymoon sex was very
difficult,
like lackluster. It wasn't what I had expected.
Let me ask you a question real quick on that. You having
yes.
a very romantic mindset and stuff, were you immediately disillusioned?
That's a very good question. I think looking back at the time, I didn't allow myself to go there because I was still very, disillusioned. I was still very in love with him. And I was very much like, this is a story for another time, but there was like this really like deep, like attachment and I think almost codependency that had formed, even though we had only dated 9 months prior to that. Like, I just was very sold out to like, he is incredible. What a fucking catch, right?
Yeah.
And so it didn't really register to me at that point. I just was like, oh, well, you know, I'm a good little Christian girl, right? I'm like, this is normal and, you know, we have to have sex and everything like that. And it was, I don't, like, I'll share this and if you want to blot it out later because it's too much, but I'm going to share it. But like, it was just picture this. I'm a virgin girl who only has read some romance novels, right? And then did absolutely nothing, no dating, no nothing. I had never even watched porn. I feel like that's important because I know that a lot, but like never watched, physically seen porn. Like,
so
I don't even remember
seen sex scenes or anything like that from movies.
So your very first experience sexually was your wedding night or your wedding?
The honeymoon?
My wedding night, I would say that because like any kind of like quote unquote sex scenes that I saw in movies were very like they're not like nowadays. Like Netflix can go crazy, right? With what they show. It wasn't like that. It was just kind of
you had to assume the rest of the things happening.
So I have a question. Did you live in like some kind of backwoods sheltered? I mean, I had porn. I know I'm older than you. I had porn exposed to me when I was in school. So how did you escape? And that was back in the 70s. So I mean, how did you escape?
So
that?
So I was homeschooled for most of my life, and it wasn't super like cool, like I guess it is nowadays. I don't know, where it's like, oh, there's all these
there's a
homeschool
lot more
groups and everyone's.
acceptance of it now. Absolutely.
I mean, it was not like that. Like my only friends were like church friends that I sometimes would see outside of church, and then I went to a very, very small private school for 3 years, from 7th to 9th grade, and then after that I came back home and I graduated like from home early, and I just did not have like friends.
So
I didn't have anyone.
friends. So like I will say for guys have a lot more guys showing guys like, oh, look at this naked girl and look at this porn site. So guys do that a little more, I feel like.
I had a Cheryl Teague's picture in my pocket for
Brooke
Shields, not Brooke Shields. Who was it?
Someone from the 70s.
I think it was
but
10, whoever that was, that had
I
the
have-
beads and she ran on the beach.
Bo Derek.
Bo Derek, that's the one. I had a picture of her in my wallet when I was like.
But
in
I feel like
7th
that's
grade
more
or
of a
8th grade.
like, I don't know. I don't feel like girls bring a lot of girls like naked photos and like look at this guy,
no.
look at this, and
No.
at least that's been
No.
my experience. So I mean, if yours is similar to mine, like, you know, you're saying, how did you get away from porn? How'd you never see that? I don't remember seeing a lot of porn as a kid until I started having more guys in my life.
Well, and the
Okay.
thing is
Yeah.
so like, I don't even remember like my mom having the sex talk with me. I remember being sat down and like she started to tell me, and then everything blanks out. So I don't, I
Wow, how
didn't know.
tragic was it?
So like, I don't remember any of that. Like, so then I do remember when I was about 14, probably 14. My best friend at the time, her mom, I guess instead of having the talk with her, gave her like one of those educational books to read that didn't have pictures. It was just words.
Oh, that
And
sounds
she
boring.
She let me read it. She was like, oh my gosh, look. And that was the first time I learned, oh, that's how his
That's
penis
how
gets
puzzle pieces
inside.
fit
It has to
together.
get hard. Like I was 14 years old and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
like I
yeah.
didn't even know it then. And so, you know, fast forward then to I'm married and excuse me,
Did the
it was-
sex ever improve then?
well, so like it was painful the first few days while we were on the honeymoon, and like I was subject to like because you have to understand the religion. Like in that religion, it's very like purity is like so
Right.
highly.
Oh, and I mean, we
know.
both, or at least I came from it with the purity culture.
Right, it's just
Yeah.
like-
no, I didn't come
that's
from
like-
the purity culture. I had sex when I was 11. That's the first time I had sex.
12 or
Okay.
something.
11,
Oh,
12,
wow.
Oh yeah, like that's a
Yeah.
whole nother story. But yeah, I come from the purity culture, so I do understand like that it is so important.
Yeah. So I just was like, he was not supposed to write, because this is what good Christian guys, I guess, they, you know, are supposed to do, and is like, oh, like the wife's body is now completely his as well, and that's
Yeah, I
where
would
he's
say
to
we
do-
had that understanding.
Yeah,
like I'm
he's
his, you're
too-
mine, etc. Mm-hmm.
and he's to derive pleasure from you and everything. And so like at one point, I think it may have been the very next day of our honeymoon, he wanted to look down there, like at between my legs, and like totally explore it, and like just like put his hand, like open it up, and it was very
Like
for
uncomfortable.
somebody who had nothing. Like I had nothing.
Mhm.
And I was taught to, you keep your legs closed. Like, you're not supposed to let anyone up there. You're not even supposed to masturbate. And then to go into allowing this other person
Explore.
to do whatever he
did
wants
you
to
feel
your
like
body.
shamed about that? Like, did it embarrass you?
I wasn't sure how to take it, because remember, I was on my honeymoon and I was still very like, oh, he's so amazing. So I let it happen. But the effects of like that and everything else that happened in the marriage weren't seen until years later.
Yeah. Which I want to have you fast forward, because 14, almost 15 years with someone
And 3 children, you
Yeah.
said.
and 3 children. Yeah. Like, how
Yeah.
did that start breaking down? Was it the sex that was the problem? Was there a lot more to that? Like, what was the evolution of the breakdown of that? And then how did you come out of
Right.
that?
Well, okay, so the sex did improve. It doesn't hurt forever, right? So for first few months, I don't know how long, I actually was like desirous of it, because it's something new, right? It's something exciting. It's
yeah.
like, oh my gosh, wow. But I remember it was somewhere even before we were married a year where that started fading, and I didn't really want to have it. And it was very much so, like, he was dealing with his own like deep rejection issues and things like that, and I was dealing with my own stuff, and we didn't even have names for it at that time. And he had like this subconscious mindset that whenever he wanted to have sex, I better fucking say yes.
Right.
And at first, when you're in the honeymoon phase, that was fine.
Yeah.
But like, it wasn't even a year later to where I was like, I didn't want to have it all the time. Like, it was just so spur of the moment, so random. It was
Did
just
you
so
guys
like
not have any other chemistry at all?
Chemistry. That's so. See, in the church, that's not a thing. Like, I don't ever remember them talking about having chemistry with anyone.
Well, I mean, obviously you didn't have sex first,
Well, I
so
know
that
what
didn't
they
attract
taught.
you.
They taught us that sex was the glue that kept marriage together.
Absolutely,
And so that's bullshit. Relationship and love is what keeps the marriage.
Communication.
Preach it! Oh my God, I love
That
it.
is what
Yes.
I have learned. I can't say for everybody, but I have
Right,
learned.
yeah.
Sex is the cherry on top. I mean, that's the bonus.
But so
And
many couples start with sex only, and when that fades, like you said, a year in, some people it's not even a year in. It could be weeks or months. What do you cling to? So what did you guys have after that was fading?
Well, so the thing is I wouldn't even say that it was just sex from the beginning. It was definitely this like, it's hard to explain, this kind of attachment that I formed to him. It's odd. I don't know how to exactly explain it. And we would have fun together. We would laugh. We were friends. Like we did start off as friends. But we also had our religion. We were both very passionate about that, and very like, just like, we're both stubborn. We're both pretty, like, when we believe something, it's like we're all in.
Yeah.
So we had that in common. And then I had this attachment to him. And I remember, though, less than a year, I was talking to somebody. It was a youth pastor's wife. And I remember telling her, I said, he's not my dream man. Like, I realized he's not like the one I wanted. He's not my type. Like, and just on a side note, he absolutely is not my type, like, in any way, which is why all my family, I didn't know at the time, was totally shocked when I ended up with him.
How'd you
I'm
get
not
that
talking,
guy? Yeah.
Like, not just physically, but like in every way. I mean, like, he is not just a little bit different, like completely different. And so, but the response was just very, well, your dream man, he's probably married to somebody else now. And I just remember my 19-year-old little heart just dropped. And I felt like, oh my God, the person who is meant to be mine, he's gone. Like, he's already with somebody else. I missed it. And it was just like, their view is almost too bad, so sad. You got to keep moving forward. And if you just ask God, God can make this person your dream person.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's where, like, would you say that was a point in your life then that you just kind of you settled into the marriage? Like, all right, accept it. This is what it is. It's not my favorite, but I'm committed, and this is, I'm devoted to God, to this man, and to this relationship, and divorce is not an option. Like, you just kind of dug in your heels at that point then.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I would not have at all worded it that way, because I still had in my mind, like, I knew he wasn't what I wanted, but I was so, like, in love with him that I was like, I can't leave him. It's a very odd place to be in, to know that this isn't the person you want, but there's some sort of, like, really, really deep attachment.
What's that syndrome called? When you're
Stockholm syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, where you fall in love with your captor kind of thing. And
I'm not saying that. I just
thought of it.
Thought of it. Yeah.
Right. I don't know what it was. I mean, to be honest, it's going to take longer than this podcast to really explain it.
Do you think that your breach in religion was the major problem when you guys divorced? Is that what your belief system started to change? Because you said you were very passionate.
You were passionate together.
Where did that breach in the passion? Where did that come from? Where did that start?
Okay, that's a good story. So, sex was always a huge thing for us. It was up and down, very, very bad. But the love for romance novels never went away. It actually would come back. And so when I was around 19, 20, I picked him back up again. But I had to read him in secret because, bad.
So this
you
is
don't
kind of
read
like
that
a
stuff.
form of coping mechanism that's like escapism. Like
Yes,
you're escaping what your reality is and diving into these books that you that you wanted your life to be.
I say that that's what men do with porn, or even women. I don't know what women do, but I could tell you what. I mean, I think we dive into that.
Yeah.
Kind of. You guys do a novel into the
like
romance
parts, right?
Or there's, I shouldn't say you
yeah.
guys. There are certain individuals that will go the romance route. There's certain individuals that may go the sexual route to get away from, like you said, to fantasize. And these areas, in my experience, they're so far beyond reality that it makes...
That it does create, when you come back to reality, it's much more gray every time you return. So I don't know if you felt that way, Lizzie, but like...
It's also a form of voyeurism, because you're like peeking in on someone else's affairs. And
even if they are fantasy
you're
related,
like peeking in on their windows and watching... And in porn, it's watching people have sex. It's kind of icky, you know?
It's kind of interesting.
But it's not, you know.
But yeah, so every time you dove into these books, you had to come back to the reality that you didn't have this.
Right. I mean, that's a whole nother story about my relationship with romance novels that we could get into another time.
But you're saying that was like the split that started to become why you guys ended.
Oh God, that's a very multifaceted answer. Yeah, that was one of the reasons, is like, since I'm a writer, I wanted to write romance, but I wanted to write like that kind of romance.
Like
and
steamy,
I couldn't because that's immoral. That's wrong. That's bad. Like, I couldn't even read a Christian novel long without him being like, have you read your Bible today? How many hours have you been reading? Like, it was very controlled.
Yeah.
And so, and then there was the sex, like, and as the years went on, that became harder and harder until it began to evolve into, I feel disgusted. Like, the feeling of disgust is one of the absolute worst feelings in the world, because your whole body, your mind, everything doesn't want to be touched, yet you're having to allow this person's hands and body and mouth to be on you. And it was absolutely horrifying.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate just from sexual abuse in my history of that, just having those feelings and sensations come up. It's very difficult.
It was extremely difficult, and I did seek help. Again, I only in the church, and it was all just, well, light some candles, or try going to bed naked first, or pray before. You know, there was never anything other than that. It was all about, well, we need to fix this because you've got to have sex because you're his only outlet, visually and sexually. It was never, let's delve deeper. Like, let's see if there's something more there.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we shared a little bit about that with our story.
Whose responsibility is one's sexual contentment. I mean,
but with the way we grew up, and you grew up similar, it sounds like, in the sense that, like, you know, once you make this covenant together, you are his and he is yours. So it's each of your responsibility to keep the other party happy. And this is where, like, we've evolved and changed and grown out of that. Have you changed and grown and evolved out of that mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, your sexual happiness ultimately is yours. Mm-hmm. I think it's yours to take into your hands and say what you want or what you don't want. And, but like with him, with my ex, that it wasn't even that. It was definitely, I didn't realize it was definitely sexual chemistry, along with other things that we would get into another time. And so that's why I say, like, sexual chemistry is actually a thing. Like, it just wasn't there. Yeah, and I don't think we had chemistry on other levels as well. And the romance novels were like this safe place for me to run. But then when I wanted to start writing them is when it was really something where he was like, no.
Did you start writing? You said, so when you started writing, did you have to hide them?
Absolutely, I did. I hid them, or I did write some young adult novels, but they had to be like incredibly pure. Like chaste. You could, like no cussing.
Did you ever get caught?
No, not with those, because I didn't write. That was towards the end of the years of us being married. The other ones, though, that he was able to read, because they were young adult and there wasn't anything in them, he would almost go through them with like a fine-tooth comb and be like, she put her hand on his thigh. I was like, well, that's it. They don't go any. Well, it gives the image. Like, it was that strict, and it was very stifling to my creative.
Let me ask Greg a question here, because you're the male in the room at the moment. Like, what do you think about all of like this and the man's point of view? Do you have point of view about her relationship up to date so far?
Yeah, it sounds pretty abusive, but at the same time, well, everybody has a choice. And I know when, well, yeah, that.
Like, what's coming up for you in her telling this story and sharing like this? That anything coming up for you as a male heterosexual?
From when to when? At this moment, what do I feel, or have I felt?
Yeah, no, at this moment of how you've evolved as a man and through your journey and process, like, what does this make you feel right now?
This, well, it reminds me of myself, and it makes me sick because I've been in his shoes. I've followed in that strict kind of religion before,
Right, yeah.
and you at the same time followed suit, and both of you at the same time, or but at least the way I felt it at the same time, we're in agreement on this. And I think, and I know, when to answer the question, it wasn't very long ago in our relationship that shocking revelation came that you're not responsible for my sexual.
Yeah, that's still fairly new for us. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're still working through that because I still have my own questions on that of because it's the longer you're programmed, I think it, well, that can't be totally true. Sometimes the longer you're programmed, the harder it is to unprogram. Sometimes not.
Yeah.
But there are certain things that I think that have been grooved into society. Even today, people have a thinking about who's the head of the household and what's all our roles, what all those roles mean. And that is, I'm learning, and actually we just self-learned, those roles are who's ever best at them. I mean,
right, they don't have to be genderized. Like, the woman has to cook and she has to clean and you have to go to work. It's who's good at these things, who's good at cooking, who likes
also come
cooking,
from when you were talking about the sexual abuses and that kind of thing, that it sounds like that religion teaches in that situation. I'll call it abuse right now because that's what it is. The man is the head of the wife, yeah. as Christ is head of the church and submits himself and all that stuff. There is a partnership. It could be 3, 4, 5, 2 people. It is a partnership and a friendship that evolves.
And communication is so important with that, especially in sex and
sex. And we've gotten to a place, and I'm taking over this thing, but
no, I'm asking you, like, how does this story of hers make you feel?
Well,
I mean, you're the only man in the room here that might feel a little bit like cringy.
Our relationship is similar because of the abuse, but I also had a past of wives that I had already pretty much. Well, anyway, I knowing what you had gone through made me extra cautious in the things. And many of the things that happened in our sex life, and it still does, the arguments we'd have were because of sex. Everything else ran pretty smoothly, except money sometimes.
Money and finances. And that's why I asked you, like, was sex the breakdown, Lizzie, for that actual relationship? Because that is, like, the number one. And then finances, if it's not tied, it's right there as well. Like, that's what breaks down marriages.
Because in our religion, it was... I'm sorry, I interrupt you. You were asking Lizzie a question, so go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I asked you, like, sex was just sex, the real breakdown. And
it wasn't just sex. There was a lot more to it, but it was a huge thing. And, you know, how Greg had just said that he knew about your past, so he was sensitive with you.
As best as he could be, but he had impatience. He could get really mad about it sometimes.
Young guys are full of testosterone.
Yeah.
So...
Well, and that's the thing, though, like, as the years went on, my ex he'd be like, you weren't sexually abused, you weren't this, so, like, what's the problem? What's the problem? And it's like it made me feel, and I didn't realize it at the time, I felt shame for that, because it was almost like, well, you need to have a reason that you don't want me to fucking touch you. Were you raped? Were you abused? Because that's what you act like. And I love you. I'm loving. Why are you fucking acting this way? Well, he didn't say fucking, but I say it. And, you know, and so it just, I know we don't have time, like, it's 15 years worth of shit, right? But, like, it got to the point to where I 100% believed I was asexual. And asexual is a spectrum, and there are asexuals who do not want to have sex at all, but they'll want to have a romantic relationship. That's what I thought I was. Like, I was 100% sure that that's what I was because of how traumatized I was from our sexual encounters.
Well,
and not all of them.
And I love that you brought that in here. And we're going to actually end this episode right here and have a part 2, because this is really, really good so far, of just you opened up and saying like, oh, I'm pan and it really doesn't matter in person. But then you realize like partway through your marriage, like, I think I'm asexual. I don't even want to have this. So I want to keep diving deeper into this, because I think a lot of people in your past position will be able to resonate with this, that maybe there still are people, women in your position, that are just feeling that same thing and just like, oh, I must be the only one, something's wrong with me, because those were the narratives it sounds like you were playing in your head, like, I'm broken, I'm the problem, what is wrong with me? So we're gonna stop here, and please pick up for part 2, because this isn't just her, this is a very common message that comes from the purity culture. And I want to see, I mean, part 2, we'll see how did you evolve to where you are today, and what does that look like. So I want to thank Lizzie Parker for being part of our episode today.
Yay,
and being so vulnerable, sharing things, because it's not easy getting out here and putting your stuff into the public's point of view, having it be a position where someone could very quickly take you apart and they might shred us in the comments for even allowing this, but you know what, we're here to evolve and improve ourselves. So stay tuned to episode 2 to find out how Lizzie evolves into the woman and the powerhouse and the confident person that she is today, that we know. And thank you for being part.
Thanks, Lizzie.
Thank you.
Well, that is our episode. We hope you enjoyed hearing Lizzie Parker, her story, her evolution. And stay tuned. We are going to put part 2 on the website only. We put exclusive behind the scenes after the podcast, all on there at myslc.org. Head on over there to catch the episode 7 of where Lizzie Parker kind of continues her story, and you get to see how she's evolved to the woman she is today. Until next time, everyone, be evolving, people.